Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs. Their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com. Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicated. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/Security Weekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Oh, do I have an announcement? What's the announcement? I did. Maybe. I was slacking. Literally and figuratively. Yes.
I was slacking. Hold on. There is... our on demand. Yeah. Visit securityweekly.com/on-demand. If you missed one of our fabulous webcasts, we have we did 6 that I think are all up there, and some extra ones we put in our on-demand. So our webcast content is really cool, so make sure you go check it out at securityweekly.com/on-demand. And now, the stories for this week. Where'd you guys want to start?
That's a great
question.
The return of email flooding?
Sure.
Now, I used to think that these were just old wives' tales and that we have in security about how, when attackers do an attack, they typically do a distraction attack, such as DDoSing your network or email flooding or doing some very loud and noisy activity, but under the scenes, behind the scenes rather, they're infiltrating your network, and by the time you find out, it's too late. I always thought that was more of a Hollywood story than something that actually happened. What's your experience? Is Not Kevin here with us too? Okay. Hey, welcome.
I am here.
Welcome, Not Kevin. How are you, Mr. Waff?
Thanks for having me back.
Captain Waff.
Captain Waff. Waffing away over here.
So, thoughts, Kevin? You've been around, despite your boyish good looks and charm. You've been around for a long time and may have heard these wives' tales I speak of where there's a distraction attack.
A distraction attack, such as shadowing someone walking into a front door, to all of your numerous ways of defeating very expensive and fancy controls.
Right, yes. A lot of hand-waving to mask the actual attack.
Or doing something small to kind of, as you're pointing out, to cover up doing something larger in the background. Your kind of false flag, if you will. And these are fairly well understood tactics. Rare, but well understood.
Yeah, I think that was my point. No, Kevin, they're kind of rare, right? And I think this this article that talks about kind of this new wave of email flooding may make these not as rare. And maybe it's also an interesting aspect of the story is it's out of necessity that they're getting caught, or those methods of phishing are getting harder and harder all the time, and so now they have to bring back some of these older techniques.
It is something I've seen quite recently in at least a particular banking Trojan campaigns. If particularly speaking of YourSniff, if it's able to steal the organization's Outlook global address book, it will sign you up for, say, numerous different types of subscription lists to then hide the fact that it's using your own email to then forward on internally. It is effectively DOSing yourself as a smokescreen. Yep. That's the first time I've kind of seen that as an automated process. And I think there's other campaigns that are also doing something similar. But to your point, Paul, I think it's taking old tricks that worked in the past, but providing more of an automation infrastructure around it to kind of make it effective again.
Yeah, I also, it's not the first I've heard of that exact situation where there's some older, and Larry, I don't know if you've looked into this, but older like Windows password dumping tools, they're so old that nothing catches them today. And so attackers are going back to what's so old that over time, as the defensive have shifted, updated, we got to catch these. The first couple of ways to exploit that vulnerability or get left out. I think that's really cool and interesting. Something we need to be aware of when we're making defensive tools, though.
I think it's kind of sad.
On a similar note, Paul, I've seen, we look at all these defensive technologies, and it's just a challenge to kind of stay up with tactics and how things change, but we forget about things in the past. I've seen a lot of tools that, maybe we moved on to next generation AV or firewall or X, Y, and Z, but there's still the 20-year-old tool that is worth blocking, but is not invested anymore. And to actually say putting the signature back into the product, it's ironic at best.
Yeah, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say it's kind of depressing to me that, and I guess it's just the nature of the beast, where the old becomes new again, because there's a certain amount of even just like, how we see sort of our short attention span in terms of paying attention to current events and the media and stuff like that. There's sort of a similar type of short attention span when it becomes to, stopping all the new, and sometimes the old stuff still works, compounded by the fact that, people still rely on a lot of older technology, even though we all assume that everybody's always upgrading. It keeps us all employed, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
you actually have a really good point that keeps me up at night when you start thinking about medical technology or other types of ICS networks where you have devices that either cannot be updated or it's just not cost feasible to update. These old techniques are still incredibly relevant because you can't stop them. The vendors stop patching. There is no OS upgrade you can do. And now we're talking about power plants or water treatment facilities. Those are the kind of things that truly terrify me.
Yeah, and I think it was a few weeks ago, Joff and I were talking about fragmentation reassembly bugs.
Oh, geez.
That was like one of the first things I learned, even before Mike Poor was an instructor.
Yeah.
And was taking over that same content. I mean, we're talking probably 17, 18 years ago. So, and that just came back in the past couple of months. So it definitely is a thing that I think we have to be aware of. And I think especially those that are not just implementing, but developing these defensive technologies.
Well, I think it ties in a little bit to the discussion we had with our esteemed guests earlier in the evening, and this whole sort of trend, if you will, and it's probably not the best word, that so much of this industry is driven by what's new and what's different and what's cool, and there's so many companies that are out there that are struggling just to keep up with anything. And we assume, I think it was Dan mentioned, companies update their systems every 3 to 5 years, and there's probably companies that do that. But I think there's also a lot of companies that try to get 7, 8, 9, 10 years out of their technology because they're not conditioned to, they're not ready to be committing that much in terms of resources and budget to do to do that type of refresh. So the industry keeps driving things new. What's the latest? While companies are out there struggling to just stay afloat with older technologies because it works and it runs whatever underlying application they're running, whatever their business process is. So the reason why these old things still work is because sometimes it's not that the old techniques are working on new technology. Sometimes it's the old techniques are working on the old technology because it's still out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. I did have an article about a new method of fuzzing. I do have to say that my browser is really messed up right now. And
You're
that
slacking again, aren't you?
that's one that you just have. No, I would just, I don't know what I was doing with my mouse. It has one of those crazy side buttons, and I just hit it again. And gray box fuzzing, I think they called it. It was basically a new method of fuzzing. Really, to do it justice, you got to go read the article. It's very, it's a deep, heavy read. Basically, they say in coverage-based gray box fuzzing, the fuzzer is provided with a seed file and randomly flips, deletes, copies, or adds bits in order to generate new files that can be parsed by the tested library in order to find potential vulnerabilities. And so they say the problem is that in complex file formats, bit flips do not generate valid files. So they've come up with a way to basically fuzz better, and they call it innovative mutation operators that will give you more likelihood of a valid file when fuzzing. Again, it was a super deep technical article. Definitely something worth checking out, especially if you're on the offensive testing side and doing fuzzing.
I don't know if it was your word or their word, but potential vulnerability I object to. It's either a vulnerability or it's not. It's a weakness or it isn't. A potential vulnerability sounds more like it's a risk or there's a threat, depending on how you define those terms.
Yeah, it's probably more likely a potential security vulnerability. Again, they're assuming that they may not know if it is or not. I think most times, if you cause a condition that is not expected, it's at very least a bug, right? Carlos?
You nailed the head. You nailed the
Hit the nail on the head. Yep, got it.
Hit the nail on the head. Yeah. So it's actually just a play of words. A possible vulnerability, it just means that, hey, we got it to crash. We don't know if it is a vulnerability. We need to now look into it and find out. That's the job of Fuzzer. Just tells you where when stuff just craps out, and then you have to go in and confirm if it is actually a vulnerability or not.
A company that we use here, and it was interesting. I saw Sennheiser in the security news, and I was like, "Oh no!"
What?
Like, wait, the ones we're wearing right now are actually Sennheiser, but it turns out that this is very much analog, hardware. They are powered, but that's it. But they do make a lot of other products, including a headset that uses VoIP. It's like a soft phone software that talks to their specific headsets, which I didn't even know that they made. It's probably very much a commercial line for commercial call centers, most likely. So they say that so they had to create an encrypted connection, right? Because obviously your voice was going over now the network to talk to this soft phone. Right. So, and the way they did that was by establishing, and I quote, an encrypted WebSocket with the browser. That process involved installing a self-signed TLS certificate in the operating system's trust store, where obviously they store the root CA certificates. Yes. I mean, that pretty much sums it up right there. There's not a whole lot. Like, don't do that? I mean, what else could we say?
It goes back to what we were talking about old errors still happening. Coders are still going to make cheated code. They don't learn from the past. In fact, when you go to a coding class, nobody goes like, hey, these are the regular vulnerabilities that we have been seeing throughout all the years. Make sure that you don't see them. I still remember when IPv6 came out and we were implementing IPv6 in a bunch of devices, and lo and behold, we were repeating the same vulnerabilities that were in IPv4. People simply forgot to add those controls into their brand new stacks.
And so many people touted IPv6 as the security cure for all things TCP/IP networking and security related. Yeah.
But it's still human coders coding those stacks, and they didn't follow the RFC completely, or they just go like, I'm going by the RFC for IPv6. I'm going to ignore everything from IPv4, and we're not going to decide what we're porting into it. And I still remember when we were able to just send a packet to the echo and just pipe it to somewhere else and just create, again, a flood. like we used to do in IPv4 many years ago.
Yep. I thought this article was interesting too. 5 ways open source software companies make money. Did you guys read this?
No.
You should. It's pretty interesting because we can kind of pick through the list and talk about what might annoy us more than other things, or what we've experienced with in their first example. They say the first model is support, and I don't know. I think I've progressed to the point today where I'm not buying into that theory that you should use open source software but then pay for support and expect what level of support. And I think also today that model is very antiquated because, I mean, where does everyone else that's on the show tonight go to get their support? Like, where do you go?
I go to Security
Google,
Weekly.
Reddit.
Yeah, you go to Reddit, you go to Stack Overflow, right? For bad, worse, or indifferent, like it's pretty much how I view Stack Overflow, right? It's not the greatest resource, but if we dig long enough, oftentimes we can get to the solution to our problem, and that is because, like we were interviewing Dan and Vitze, and then they talked about when systems weren't really interconnected and the first search engines, but now I think that support model is kind of antiquated. What do you guys?
Well, I kind of think of it like the what's the game show where you win $1 million and you can phone a friend, or you can poll the audience, or you can do the 50-50. I mean, I don't do much.
You want to be? Do you want to be a millionaire? Is that no?
Yeah.
Do you want to be?
So you want to be?
So you want to be a millionaire?
You want to be a millionaire?
Yeah, with the the guy.
I don't dabble in this very much these days, but when I have a question, when I'm trying to get an answer to something, I would much rather phone a friend, poll the audience type of thing, rather than, God forbid I should have to call support. I mean,
but
it's just.
But remember, we're putting it in the context of ourselves. Now, when we put it in the context of a company, many times I remember I've been in meetings with CIOs, CEOs, and other people, especially when I used to work in products stuff, not in consulting. Both at Hewlett Packard and Tenable. I remember going to customer meetings, and the customer wants that support contact. They want somebody they can gel at and say, like, I need this fix in 24 hours, or I need you for this to promise me an SLA of X amount of time that I'm going to get this fix. For us, small and medium, no problem. Very large enterprises still will pay an arm and a leg just to have that SLA and going like, I need somebody to yell at, and I need somebody to fix this as fast as possible. So we're still going to see support be a good revenue stream for many of these companies if their solution or their piece of software is supposed to be an enterprise one. Now, if their target is going to be consumers, I don't think so. Enterprise, yes.
Yeah, because I think enterprises, Carlos, to your point, look at it as almost like a consultant or extension, like contractors that can help them resolve problems more quickly.
Well,
which
they're
benefits
essentially paying you to be their friend. It's still the phone a friend concept, but
you're right.
They're paying for the privilege. They want to be able to phone somebody and get the answer.
We used to say we need a throat to choke.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was some of my former boss's old answer was, we don't want to use open source software because when you need somebody to fix something, who do you call? You can't call the internet.
Largely, that's changed, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, to
'Cause
Carlos's
Stack
point
Overflow,
too, if the large enterprises do,
Yep.
I think require that as almost. Now, the other thing is hosting, and this is the WordPress model, right? WordPress is free, but you can come host with us. Now, as far as I know, the last time I looked, WordPress as a company is doing very well. That model is certainly working for them, and I think many others, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know a couple of invoicing companies that actually make quite a good penny doing that.
So that is a good model. The other, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm thinking maybe the way to ask your question that you're trying to get at is more. Maybe the question is more how do you define open source these days? Are the companies that are in it for profit and they're doing things like giving support and hosting, has the idea of what open source is. Again, thinking back to our conversation about Satan a little while ago, Satan was open source and free.
Yes. Big difference. You're right, Jeff. Yes.
And that's different from, Tenable. Tenable was open source for a while. I forget how long, but
well, they were open source.
Started.
Yeah, they were open source and free. In other words, you could view the source code and anyone could get it for free. And then they switched to a closed source model, of course, several years ago, right? Not long before I started working there, actually. And, I think that speaks to the article talking about restrictive licensing and some of the other things. And one could argue, Jeff, there is definitely a difference between something that is purely open source and free, right? And the other projects that have started to adopt these models to commercialize it, that there is a difference there, that some decisions might be made to benefit the business rather than the greater good. Now, I'm not saying that happens in a lot of cases either. But certainly there's all these different models to consider and understand the ramifications to that. I think that the reason that I have an issue kind of with also support and hosting is I think what you get with the closer to true commercial software that you get, the more they are changing software and adding features to benefit their paying customers, and there is a formalized function for that. I've said this on the show before. That's one of the major differences. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons, the free, open source, or commercial, right? But to me, in a lot of situations, I think you really benefit in a commercial setting, and the closer you get to commercial setting, that they're managing features based on the needs and requirements of paying customers.
But
and also it's a very good way to get adoption.
Sure.
And it's just a business strategy. It's not that, we want to help the world, we want to help our customers. No. Many times that's pure BS. I've been, right now I work out of a co-working space where a lot of startups go in to start their business. And I've heard many of the meetings, because it's an open space, where they're talking about going open source. And many actually are very honest to go like, hey, if we open source this, or we open source this much, we're going to get a flood of people coming in. It's going to, with our media campaigns, our social media stuff, it's going to create buzzwords. It's going to get a lot of attention. People are going to install it. And then once we get them hooked in and they just get a small taste of it, now we can just start charging for the other stuff. And many times they'll present it in their media, although presented in their advertisement, like, hey, we want to do this because we want to be good with you. We want to be good with this, with the community at large. But in fact, what they're just actually doing is just kind of using the drug dealer model of just giving you that taste, getting you hooked, and then
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, but it helps in the beginning. And my experience is that every company that I've observed that has done this to a certain capacity, I haven't looked at them all, right? And some people are very successful in this model, Carlos, but many struggle with, and I lived this for some time at Tenable, right? Is I think you reach a plateau of converting your free user population to paid products, right? And I'm saying that speaking from very, very clear experience, well-defined experience in trying to do that it becomes difficult. And I've noticed that in a lot of other companies now too, is that you reach that plateau and it's still good to have that open source, but at a certain point when you're plateauing, you've got to do other things to help convert those people and drive your commercial sales. So,
and that many times happen when the founder actually starts with that altruistic view of let me give this out for free. I want to share it. I want to get feedback, and all of a sudden that free thing that you're giving out all of a sudden becomes your business, and that's the way you make money, and you want to grow that business. Now you're kind of having that dichotomy of values there that you're getting confronted with. I did this because of this, but now several years later, this is how I paid the bills. This is how I maintain my family. Now stuff changes. What do I do? Do I change or I do not change?
Yeah. And I mean, and I say, I have my challenges with that. Obviously, Tenable's done very well. Also, I think a shining example, which is interesting because of the history, is SourceFire was extremely successful in that. I mean, those are two very successful, arguably some of the most successful exits in our industry, and largely both of them stem from open source projects. So clearly, the model does work.
Well, I'm still hung up on the term open source, I guess, because commercial software companies, commercial product companies, they're still trying to get the market share to get interest. So they'll do something. Usually they call it a pilot. They're giving it away. Trying to get somebody to use it, so then they can point to them, say, "Look, so and so uses it," and if they can get the marquee customer, they can drive the interest type of thing. So, what is open source? Is it really just having access to the source code so people can look at it?
Well, no, it depends
based on all of our discussions this evening. Who does that? They just they want something that's free or at least cheaper, and they'll pay as little as possible to get it. But that bumps up against these companies want to make money and make a living.
Yeah, and that depends largely on the license, Jeff. I think. It's very difficult to frame this conversation around all of the different license types because there are so many.
Sure.
We talk about the GPL licensed, and there's different versions of that. BSD licensed, obviously, I think we'd be remiss not to mention the Metasploit, right, was taking BSD license, which is one of the most, and there's different BSD licenses, right, but they tend to be the most open in that if you reuse is obviously one of the things in the license. Anyone can reuse it, even for commercial purposes, right? So you're right, Jeff. There's different levels of that, and I think the article goes over some good models that cover that too. One of them is restrictive licensing, right? So choose your license, and that can be a lot of research you're going to have to do.
That's why I see a difference between free FLOSS, free Libre open source, and open source. Open source means I can see the code. I'm just taking the word literally.
Right.
I can see the code. I can see what's happening. I can make a copy. I can do whatever I want. Licensing is going to restrict me what I can actually do. And that's where we actually go into the world of FLOSS, free Libre open source. How free am I? How Libre am I to actually use this software and tailor it to what I need?
Yep. So yeah, it was a good article. It sparked a good discussion. Larry,
for the record, I did post some stories to the show notes, so you guys may need to refresh.
Sweet, you got one you want to talk about?
The one that I was actually kind of fascinating with was
the
my
massage
story.
app.
Oh, wait, what? I put that in there?
No.
One of my stories, number one, the data exfil via smart bulbs. This one took a way different turn than I thought it was going to. And even when I'm reading through it, I'm like, oh, well, they did it this way. Nope, they did it completely different.
Wait, is this the one they're flying the drone and noticing the blinks from the light bulbs? Didn't we cover a story like that?
That is different, but similar type of thing in that they flash the lights and they can do that. But what these folks did is that there's a smart bulb manufacturer that works with both Philips and Osram, Sylvania.
Okay.
So Osram Sylvania is big, and they actually have manufacturing in Pawtucket.
Oh, interesting.
I'm sorry, Central Falls. And what happens is these bulbs have Bluetooth low energy, Bluetooth low energy connection that you use with a smartphone app. And what they did is they did some compatibility analysis of the smartphone app and how it connects to the bulb, effectively reverse engineered what commands are being sent to the bulb. And because it uses Bluetooth low energy just works connectivity, but security for the connectivity, anybody can effectively connect to the bulbs.
Interesting.
And
so is it a Bluetooth low energy chip on your phone?
Yes, so you have Bluetooth low energy on your phone.
I got you. So regular Bluetooth and low energy is on all modern phones.
All modern phones. Okay. And even some of the new ones are, so Bluetooth low energy is Bluetooth 4. Some of the absolutely new phones are coming with Bluetooth 5 enabled chipsets as well.
Gotcha. And does that give you more channels or different protocols?
So it is slightly different protocol for 5 in that you can do one of two things. You can double the speed or you can increase the range. But not both.
Gotcha.
And yeah, the technologies they're using are not
compatible.
They are mutually exclusive.
Right.
So
Yeah, and we're going back to the old discussion about IoT. How are they going to update now these bulbs? Did they include that in their planning through their app for you to be able to update and fix this kind of vulnerability?
Well, yeah, it sounds like
Yeah, well,
anyone can update them.
Well, yeah. So
Yeah.
the deal is that effectively anybody can connect, and I'll explain a little bit more about that if you want me to. But anybody can connect, and based on that, what they were able to do is change the color slightly of the bulb, so that if you had another app with a smartphone that could use the camera could tell easily enough what hue had changed.
But wait, you have to take a picture of the bulb?
It's video. So if you take a video of the bulb while it's changing colors, almost imperceptibly to the human eye, if they used blue.
Wait, how are they convincing the user to take a video of their light bulb?
They're not.
Oh.
I am connecting with some device in your environment, Bluetooth Low Energy, to your light bulb. I am using the light bulb to change hue, brighter for a 0, darker for a 1. And then I'm across the street videoing the light.
Oh, okay. The attacker has the.
The attacker
I got you. Okay.
is videotaping and can.
Yeah, the story we
camera
covered a
can-
while ago was a drone that was
Yep.
that you could conceivably do it with
that.
a drone.
Yeah. So this is they developed an app.
Right.
And yeah, so I thought like, oh well, you know what? I bet they just found some value on the Bluetooth Low Energy light bulb that they could just update with their own value, and then an evil attacker can just go read that value, pull down that, and then just do assembly. Here's some data.
Right.
I'll get it. Here's some data. I'll get it. Here's some data. No, they're actually doing ones and zeros, changing the hue of the light.
It's crazy.
And the part that makes this terrifying is Bluetooth Low Energy. So Bluetooth Low Energy security model is all sorts of messed up. Classic Bluetooth, you want two devices to talk. They need to typically pair. And that pairing security, where encryption happens and authentication happens, is through a PIN.
I was going to say all based on the pin, right?
Right. Which then makes some key material, and then it stores those on the devices. So every time you connect to it, you don't have to type your PIN in.
Yeah.
Bluetooth Low Energy, on the other hand, you have the same methodology, some authentication and some encryption to the device, takes a PIN, stores it, you disconnect, throws the keys away. So every time you connect to that device, you have to enter a PIN. Oh, I want to change my light bulb. Enter a PIN. Oh, I don't like that color. Enter a PIN. Oh, I want to change the brightness. Enter a PIN. Oh, I want to play. I want to do something. I want to turn the light off. Enter a PIN. I want to turn the light on. Enter a PIN.
Ugh.
So the usability model for that is crap.
So no one does it.
So they do it, but it uses JustWorks, and JustWorks uses a default PIN of 6 zeros.
What's JustWorks?
That's the methodology they use to make it just work, so that you don't have to enter a PIN every time.
And they just all set it to some static value.
6
right.
6 zeros.
6 zeros.
6 zeros.
It has to be 6
has
zeros.
to be 6 zeros.
And that's built into the protocol.
Yes.
I gotcha. Yep. So it's always the same. It's not
always
like
the
you
same.
can choose. It's always the same.
Always.
Good.
That's like the default PIN, like in the automobiles and all that stuff. 0000 1 2 3 4.
Right. Because how on a light bulb do you enter or display a pin?
Exactly.
Right?
And from a usability perspective, every time you want to use the device, every time you want to pair with your headset,
Yeah, you'd have to
a
enter the pin. Yeah, that would
That's
suck.
nobody will use that.
No.
Yeah. Now with low energy, you can make it so that every time you want to do that, you have to enter a pin and stores the keys and retains them. That's called bonding.
Got interesting. Interesting.
So remind me again, what does a smart light bulb actually do? I mean, what about it is smart? Intended use, functionality, not all the fun extra stuff.
I have them in my house, Jeff, and it's nice, especially when you can get a light switch that you can kind of keep on all the time, or a lamp that you can keep on all the time. Although I've found that people will flip those switches and turn the lamps off. And I'm like, no, it's a smart bulb, right?
What do you mean it's a smart bulb?
You screw the bulb in and it pairs to your phone, or in my case, I like managing all through smart things, which is nice.
Or some other system.
Some other system, right? And then I can program them to be certain colors or turn on off at certain times. And then if you've got I won't say it, but the Echo, Amazon Echo ecosystem through voice commands, you can change, if it's a hue bulb or a bulb that allows you to change the brightness, You can issue voice commands to change the brightness and turn them on and off, and also set schedules.
Yep, and anything that's so there's other stuff that quote works with the Amazon Echo ecosystem. I won't say it. That we do at home as well. So
I don't know how I'm surviving without this technology.
I don't know how you are either, Jeff, because I don't know how I would survive without it, to be honest with you.
And even better, James Leetvidal, one of the other instructors for 617, posted to our instructor Slack channel yesterday. He's like, "Oh my God, check this out! It's an Amazon Echo ecosystem enabled Billy Bass."
Oh.
Yes. You pair it to your Echo ecosystem device, and every time she speaks,
oh, that's interesting.
pre-order, they get released.
And while
December
you
1st.
guys think that's cool, I see that as another example of the ultimate demise of our society. But whatever. That's the curmudgeon in me.
So I ordered 2 just because.
Just because. Why not?
Sounds more fun than giving a drum set to my nephew.
Right?
Well, we're talking light bulbs,
Yeah.
and I just happened to go out and buy a new Christmas tree today, and we were agonizing over finding one that, is it going to flash white lights or the colored lights or, the different patterns of flashes you can do. And I'm like, there's probably a smart Christmas tree. So I Google it, and there is. So I can, in theory, I can control the lights from my phone.
Yep, I have a set of those Christmas lights in my office. They're Bluetooth low energy.
Yep.
And again, I wonder, how am I living my life without all this?
Speaking of which, I can use my phone and annoy the shit out of my wife. Ready?
That's one reason why. So there's a massage app.
Okay, so you got me on that one. Now you've piqued my interest.
Did you guys know that there's a massage app? Apparently it's a UK thing.
Do you put the phone on your butt? And
No.
it vibrates?
No, like you use this to like book a massage, and this company, they had a massage app, and they left its database containing 309,000 customer profiles exposed to the public, including information about clients who had been accused of sexual misconduct, and all of that is public. And as I said, this won't be a happy ending.
Wait, what?
And yes, I added that story just so I can make that joke.
Wait, what was the app?
Oh, I'm not sure what it was in the UK. This was a New York Post article too.
Oh, it was only in the UK?
By the way. Yes.
Okay. Because there's an app like here in the US, but because I was wondering. It's like Soothe or something?
Yeah, and so the therapist would post in about inappropriate clients and quote people who wanted to, and I quote, massage in genital area, or, and I quote, asking for sexual services from the therapist. Okay. So these are the therapists giving feedback on the app. Nice. And now all of that has been made public.
Nice. So to backtrack a little bit, ready?
Urban, a London-based startup.
Alexa,
Urban.
Christmas tree off.
Oh boy. Don't say the
Alexa, Christmas tree off.
Keyword on the air.
It's not working. Huh.
I think Paul's going to change the name that his device responds to.
Yeah, some of them I've already had to do.
So on a lighter note, you had an article, Paul, that had NSA in the title. Let's talk that one.
So
why am I not surprised?
Home routers the title was Home Routers are under attack by NSA spawned malware. And essentially you have to really read into this article to figure out what the tie is to the NSA. And they say, of course, the universal plug-and-play protocols on older routers were the problem. Akamai has dubbed the flaw UPnP proxy. And the most recent slew of attacks comes from an exploit that Akamai calls Eternal Silence, in a nod to the NSA-developed Eternal family of malicious code injections. I don't know. I don't understand. That's just what Akamai called it. Apparently there was...
They paid homage to...
They paid homage to it? Or was it actually they took from the Eternal family of malicious code injections to implement the universal plug and play exploits, which are being used to take advantage of home routers. And then, of course, their subtitle is what to do. Like, and I'm just tired of all of these articles' advice on how to secure your IoT devices and your home routers. It's
Then
the
why do you
same
post them?
article reprinted over and over in like 10,000 times over. I think I've seen, the article on, changing your default password and making sure your router is not exposed to the internet and making sure it's up to date on firmware and blah, 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 blah. That's just sickening. It really grinds my gears that we're still sitting here today talking about this crap.
So, out of curiosity, when any of you read something like older routers, what do you think of in terms of time? Define older.
I ran across someone just the other day. It was pointed out to me that they're running a Linksys WRT 54G of the variety that we
They
wrote
were in the book. Those are old.
in their office,
And they're
in their home office.
various levels of old and new inside of what we covered in the book,
Yes,
too.
yes.
And
But
some
even
of the
still-
original ones were really
But even
interesting.
still, if that was like a version 7 or version 8 towards the end of the book, how old is that?
That's old.
That's very
That
old.
was 2007 we published that. So.
Yes. Yes, that's an 11-year-old router.
And that firmware,
Okay.
I guarantee you there's probably not new firmware for those devices.
Nope.
It's so old it was a hub.
Actually,
Wait.
Jeff,
Actually? Actually, Jeff?
in select models, it in fact was a hub. There was only one, the Ethernet controller had one 10100 port.
Yep.
And then it was connected to a hub on the back, and there was 4 ports, but they all shared that one 10100 kind of connection on the
Yep, in the
motherboard,
original
the
models.
hardware. Yeah,
In
some of the
model,
original ones. Yeah.
And later
That
on,
started to
it was a
change.
switch.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we dug
Cool.
into the internals of that.
Right.
at
Yeah.
all.
We had schematics of the whole
Yeah.
internals.
So while we're treading water here, I posted one article about Amazon. I and the article says Amazon's not talking a lot about it. Have you guys heard anything about the
I haven't.
Amazon
When-
data disclosure
when
that
you saw
happened
the-
right before
when you-
Thanksgiving?
When you saw this, I'm like, what? Damn it. All my shopping history is going to be out there.
That's scary.
And wait,
Right.
oh, they've contacted the affected people. Well, they didn't contact me, so hooray, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't
Well,
seen anything either.
It's
Yeah, and it
something.
was
It's
mostly
somewhat
name and
hearsay
email.
because I didn't actually read this, but I read something that apparently Amazon issued some sort of statement saying, not a big deal. Don't worry about it. We've notified all the affected people. You don't
These are
need to
not the-
change your Amazon password.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Somebody
Yeah,
else
the
back.
data that was exposed was name and email address only.
Ooh.
Still.
But they haven't gone into how. I mean, they said it was in this article that I posted. It was a technical issue, but nobody's heard of any of the details.
Yep. That might be all we get.
Mm. All right, let's talk donuts.
And then I got one after that. Go ahead. Donuts, Paul.
Donut. Oh,
Because we live in Rhode Island, and
Dunkin' Donuts is
Come
a
on
big
now.
thing here in
Dunkin'
Rhode
Donuts is a
Island.
big thing. I think this is the only state that people give directions based on where Dunkin' Donuts used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There was a credential stuffing attack. I don't know. I don't really know.
So what exactly? What?
I don't know if there's much more that I just added because it was Dunkin' Donuts.
So what? They put credentials in the donuts?
Yes.
But it allowed hackers to take a big bite out of Dunkin' Donuts customer data. Come on, dig into
Boy,
this.
that hurts, don't it?
Yes.
And there's Lee from left field. My understanding is
Just glaze over this discussion.
Nice.
oh
Nice.
man.
Oh, it's already frosty outside, so
Yep.
This was an extra bad hack.
You're,
Oh,
oh, wow.
See, you got to be from Rhode Island
You
or
guys, are,
Massachusetts, right, to understand that
you
joke.
guys are just jelly that we put that up there.
this is
you
kind of
can't
a
have your cake,
non-story.
donuts,
Now
and
that,
eat
I'm,
food.
Oh,
now that
can-
I'm reading this,
It's a what?
this is fairly a non-story. It's a story
is.
to have a story with a big brand name.
Yep.
What they're effectively saying is that there was no data breach. They're using a technique known as credential stuffing. And I'll double air quote that because I don't know what that means. Maybe it's a donut joke. But they're taking passwords from prior release breaches and then just brute forcing those against email accounts for Dunkin perks account holders. There's no breach here. They're just reusing the same password to see if it works.
Oh, that's really boring.
It is boring. Why'd you post this article, Paul?
Because it was Dunkin' Donuts. Did you see all the donut jokes we made?
Well, it's not Dunkin' Donuts anymore. It's
No, it's just Dunkin',
right? Didn't
right?
they
It's
change
just it is. They did change it to just Dunkin'.
Just donut trivialize this exploit. Oh, good God.
Oh boy!
Holy Moses!
So I didn't have like a really good survey to pick on this week. I feel like
After you, I have a good story to pick on though.
I put this one in there in lieu of a security survey that usually is sponsored, right? But it says Las Vegas police crack down on black market pot sales. And
They should probably crack down on crack sales, but
right? And so, but the article basically started off with, well, since Las Vegas has legalized marijuana, the police have been spending a lot more time responding to crimes that involve marijuana. And I'm like, okay. So I read through the article and I quote, it says Calhoun, who's the police chief or something, said he did not immediately have the statistics to compare illegal activity related to marijuana before and after the start of recreational sales, but despite what the whole article was trying to get across, like that things are so much worse. He did say that detectives seized 457 pounds of THC oil, which is up 65% from the previous year. And they also say they seized 300 pounds of marijuana wax, which is up 60%. And so
it sounds like he has a lot of statistics.
But so he does have some statistics, but you wonder, like, does that mean they're more busy, or were these just a couple of other big busts that they had? Because maybe they're paying more attention to it now that it's legalized as well. I don't know.
Or maybe that now that it's legal, the guys that have got all their stuff are like, shit, we got to get rid of this,
right? we gotta dump it. And they're making mistakes and getting caught.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that the data is inconclusive, largely for me.
Like most security surveys.
Like most security surveys and other articles. Yes, thank you very much, Kevin.
Yes.
So Larry has one.
Yeah. So as I put it, from the no shit really department, the Russian hackers haven't stopped probing the U.S. power grid. Thank you, Wired.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
And deposed dictator Francisco Franco is still dead.
Thank you, Lee.
Yep.
Making sure we. Yes.
Oh,
They're not old enough to understand that joke, Lee.
I just went with it, Jeff.
Yep.
I got the context.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. I knew he was dead already. That's all I needed to know.
Yep.
I'll Google search him later, okay?
Yep.
How do you spell that, Lee?
Watch the archives from when Saturday Night Live was funny in the 70s. They used that a lot.
Ooh.
They're not ready for prime time players. I would put your number one article in the same category as no shit really. Insiders are serious threats.
Yes, and the other thing is that is Captain Obvious. Captain Obvious apparently is making an appearance on the show quite a bit. The article quotes, "No amount of training, however, will stop a disgruntled employee with ill intent or a malicious employee who wants to cause harm or damage." Why are we even talking about training? Like, Larry, it's bad if you steal our secrets and sell them to the Russians.
Challenge
Don't
accepted.
do that, right? Like, the Larry's like, I'm
And
disgruntled.
hell, I'm gruntled.
Yeah, I'm disgruntled. And you know what? In training, they told me about this great idea to send, sensitive data and sell it to Russia.
And
I think I'm gonna.
I can get money for that?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that now.
Wow, I'm not even disgruntled, and I'm gruntled, and I'm going to do this. Wow.
Just a ridiculous notion. I did do a briefing. Is it wiretap? Am I getting that right? I got to make sure I get that right. Right? Is it wire? Have you guys heard of wiretap before? Yeah. No, it is.
Sorry, I'm reading the title. Of
not spinal tap. Wiretap. So wiretap monitors your enterprise messaging platform.
Yep.
And does artificial intelligence, and I know it's a buzzword and everyone says they does it, right? But they actually do that to gauge what types of conversations that you're having and rank them as positive, negative, criminal, harassment, and things like that. It was really fascinating. Like they could give you a graph that said, you know, in the HR department, like most chat communications are positive, right? And in development, I always pick on poor development. I don't mean to, but they're mostly negative. And in IT and operations, maybe they're more positive, right? And to give you some indicators as to who might be disgruntled and who might be likely maybe to commit insider threat was one of their stories. I was pretty fascinated with their technology. I thought it was really cool.
Can we put this on our internal Slack channel?
No. That's exactly what we said after the briefing. We're like, we could never run this on our internal Slack channel. It would be terrible.
Yeah, I was in Vegas earlier this year for a conference for a company whose name escapes me, but it was basically a forensic conference, and one of the vendors was, hawking sort of this, we can review all your, internal chats, your IMs, your emails, and we can predict based on language and phrasing and things like that on who might be, coincidentally an insider that might, be about to do something bad. And all I could think of was Minority Report.
Right? It is very Minority Report, Jeff. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, that was why I added that story, Jeff.
Well, thank you.
Paul, your story number 12, the title made me giggle out loud.
Yes. And so, of course, this came from the Hill. Yeah, pun intended, I'm sure. China's pornography laws are a backdoor for censorship. Essentially revolves around an author who authored a book and in the genre of like homoerotic fiction, and was had a very, very tough sentence, and there's somewhat of a backlash, an outcry from it because of as the article says, disproportionate and excessive severity of her sentence. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I think a lot of us kind of take for granted sometimes, especially in social media, our freedom of speech, and you go read this article and realize it's not like that in some other countries.
Yep. Yeah. While the title was a giggle, the story is in fact not.
No, I completely agree.
Damn it! I feel bad that I made a joke about it.
No, that's okay. I mean, if you have a title like that, you got to imagine that people are going to make a joke, right?
It was sensational.
And you get people's attention to highlight a more serious problem, for sure.
It worked.
Speaking of serious problems, Microsoft helps shut down fake tech support centers in India. Now, I like this because and in the article, it kind of brings to light how much Microsoft sees this problem and is aware of this problem. And now, finally, I think maybe too late, and maybe they have in the past, and it just now is becoming big enough to make the news, is that they help countries and law enforcement take down these call centers in India that are basically those fake tech support things, popping up banner ads and things like that. So Microsoft was instrumental into fighting back and giving the authorities the help they need to track down all of these places, because the users that fall victim to these attacks oftentimes call Microsoft and complain and say, I got this pop-up, I called this place, it said it was Microsoft tech support, and then they must ask them questions and collect data from their computer, like what domain did you go to, or like what was it called, right? So they're collecting data in these attacks and then figuring out, and I think they busted like 8, 9, or 10 or something, some number of sites that were taken down, physical locations of these call centers. And this was just in India. Obviously, they exist in other countries. Bless you.
Oh, thank you.
So I think that was good. A good story. About Microsoft.
Yeah. Speaking of Microsoft, Microsoft fesses up about what caused their multi-factor authentication outage with O365.
Oh, there was. Oh, really? There was, I didn't realize that.
It's Lee, did you have any comments on that one?
No, I was meaning to read that before we got on the air, because I was really intrigued at what the root cause is. I mean, they just said, bad things happened. We didn't have enough logging, enough visibility, but they didn't get down to where the core was.
Yep. So it turns out it was 3 root causes, and goes to show that DevOps is hard.
And in Microsoft, I just want to state, having interviewed Jeremy Winter from the Azure team, he's pretty high up in the Azure team, came on Enterprise Security Weekly. And what they're building in Azure and the controls and visibility they have are just astonishing. So if you're interested in that, make sure you go check out that interview with Jeremy Winter. And again, I'll say it publicly, Microsoft is a pleasure to deal with in all aspects. Their engineers, what you'll find is their engineers not only are super smart, but they've been with Microsoft almost their entire career, which tells you what a nice place it must be to work at Microsoft that people stay there for so long. So, sorry, Larry, go ahead.
Not a problem. So let's see. Let's see. Gaps in telemetry and monitoring caused lack of identification of the issues or delay in issues. And apparently they pushed some code. They introduced a rollout of code that began in some data centers on November 13th. They would be activated once a certain traffic threshold was exceeded, which happened November 19th in West Europe due to morning peak traffic. And the first root cause was a latency issue in the Azure AD MFA front-end communication to its cache services. They would render the services susceptible to the second root cause, which was a race condition in processing responses from the MFA backend server. Which then triggered additional latency, as well as the third root cause on the MFA backend, which was accumulation of processes on the MFA backend, which resulted in resource exhaustion on the backend, preventing it from processing further requests.
But good for them. If this happened at other organizations, Apple, you would not get this level of analysis. And it's reassuring, I think, to see this level of analysis from Microsoft.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Microsoft had a great explanation. I did not particularly read that one. I read sort of the summary. I mean, the Microsoft one is good.
And I think we associate DevOps and DevSecOps with Amazon and Docker and a lot of these other companies, but Microsoft, in my experience now, is very, very much in tune with the DevOps process and enabling that in their environments.
Because Microsoft is much more than just an operating system now.
Oh yeah, I mean, Azure is really,
Yep. That's
really it.
Any of their online quote properties.
That's what Microsoft is. Banking on. Sure. I thought this article was interesting. Richard Steenan. He was also the analyst that declared IDS dead, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Jeff? Someone back me up on this.
It rings a bell.
I believe he was.
Too lazy to Google it.
And he was on the show. He did come on the show.
Yep.
And it was funny, when Richard said that, we all scoffed at him.
Yep. Our buttholes puckered.
No, this can't be. This can't be. Lo and behold, Richard was right. I mean, I think in general, you could definitely, you'd be hard pressed to argue with me that he was right.
He was right, but he was ahead of his time.
Yep, absolutely.
Way ahead of his time, I might argue.
But, I mean, talk about vision. So, taking that into account, provided Richard and him, if Jack was supposed to be here, what happened to Jack? Jack would know
At
this.
a meeting for work.
Oh.
2 of them.
So he says in the article, talking about the future of cyber attack and autonomous cyber defenses, they use the word cyber a lot throughout this article, but the article says that means autonomous security orchestration, handling everything from detecting an intrusion as early as possible, deciding how to respond, identifying and isolating infected machines, and pushing out updates for firewall rule sets. I'd like to call them policies now, but basically anyway. Network segmentation, access controls. He says that's a scary prospect for us if we're going to be working in this way of basically what he very more detailedly described as automation and orchestration, right?
Yep.
He said that's a scary prospect for most of us. Most of our processes, we don't trust that much, but we have to get to the point where we can trust that we can defend ourselves in an automatic way. It's something that we've been saying on the show for some time, that automation is scary, that we've been burnt by automation.
Yep.
And, this article very much talks about that as the future that we have to get to.
Yeah.
Why? Is there a why in the article? I haven't read it.
Well, I think the attack landscape is certainly dictating why, and the way that we're implementing systems in a similar manner, right? Everything's happening much more quickly, much less cycles to, discovery, to vulnerability, to exploit, to switching attack methods, right? Couple that with the speed at which the business is moving, especially when we talk about DevOps and serverless and containers. We're pushing code in a lot of these environments. I think we kind of underestimate how many companies still have traditional waterfall, methods of development. However, so many companies now are doing DevOps, multiple code pushes a day. In order to keep pace and security with both of those aspects, we too have to be more automated and trusting of our tools to implement things in an automated process. I'm not saying take humans out completely, right? But we have to automate a lot more.
I mean, I don't disagree with the assertion because I think it's a reality, but I have that knee-jerk reaction, like I think many of us do, in terms of the reluctance to just throw everything over to automation. I mean, it goes back to war games, and turning everything over to the Whopper. But I think that, optimistically looking forward, there needs to be some sort of balance or acknowledgement that automation only takes you so far. Again, I'm thinking out loud, but the lessons of war games, you trust the technology, you trust the automation, but only up to a point. There still needs to, and we've talked about this on previous shows in different contexts, but there always needs to be a human, somewhere in the equation that's, either making a decision or making an interpretation or making a judgment call that, completely throwing things over to automation. Maybe I'm just skeptical, but while I understand there's a need to rely more on automation, I still don't fully believe throwing all your eggs in that one basket.
No, I don't think we should throw all our eggs in that one basket and think of it like that, Jeff. I think there's, even though it's a buzzword, the security, automation, and orchestration and response. I think the important word in that kind of new slogan is the orchestration. And orchestration means that at certain points it reaches a human to make a decision, right? And that is so important. And I think it's that blending of the two. You have automated processes, but you've got humans checking in on those automated processes and making at critical decision points, having a human be able to be involved in the process, because artificial intelligence, I don't think is at that point yet. Definitely, in my opinion, is not at that point yet where it can make those decisions and have that cognitive thinking, although we do see that in some really cool movies.
Yeah.
I also liked this article that interviewed Jeff Williams and another individual about 5 ways to better educate developers on application security. The part that I liked the most, that I thought was thought-provoking and want to get everyone's thoughts on, is the article says, well, in most schools, teaching advanced computer science concepts in 3 to 4 years, getting students up to speed in security is difficult, because a security focus can quickly turn digestible lessons into major projects. And Jeff Williams from Contrast Security, and was one of the original authors of the OS Top 10 list, general great guy in the community who I know, and it has a great insights on this. And he says you can make things massively more complicated. Even the typical Hello World basic application, right? Turning that into Hello Secure World is hundreds of lines. Now you've turned a very simple introduction into a massive process. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And that's why I like that this particular part of the article.
Yeah, and they're right. They're right.
And we've seen this, I think, in a lot of our own code, especially the crappy stuff we whip up in terms of like offensive security testing, as Larry and I both know. We've collaborated on some of the
validation.
Yeah, we've collaborated on some of that code together, right? We're like, make it work. And then as we go through it, right, we're like, I should put in a little extra checking here. oh, I could catch this condition if I did this. And you slowly when you start adding on that security component,
Yep.
man, things become complex really fast. And if you're just learning computer science and programming and the language, I agree. It can be daunting. It can be. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Is it?
I've got thoughts, but I'll defer to my other hosts. Our other hosts.
Carlos, Jeff,
Yeah.
Carlos, Lee, Kevin. Oh,
okay.
Kevin.
I don't know if my mic's working. I had to switch.
We can hear you. Yes.
So I was thinking that the point they said about, not only knowing what's in your software, but also the part about mentoring. Mentoring's huge. I've seen developer groups that don't have a lot of, I don't want to say sage advice, kind of go rogue and they take all the shortcuts versus ones that have somebody guiding them. I think that's a really big factor. You got to, particularly young, when people are young and starting out, you got to help them learn habits to do secure coding.
Now, what's interesting, Lee, is John Strand had the opposite viewpoint on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Really?
He said, when it comes to IDEs that have static code analysis in them, he said that junior developers tend to write more secure code when given the infrastructure, like all of these tools that do linting and static code analysis, because they're just learning and they're searching for guidance in a framework, and they want to code to the standard, right? Because they're new, and that's what they're basing their guidance on, right?
Yep.
He said when you get to a senior developer, he's like, oftentimes they're the culprit of those vulnerabilities because they go, oh, the linting and stuff. It's like, I know how to do this, and I know how to code this. I'm just going to go code this, and they often go off and code it with leaving out security completely because they know how to code it, right?
In VI.
Because
VI. Fuck the IDE.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, well, I can see that. I mean, in all the years that I've been to so many companies, the worst offenders from a security perspective tend to be the ones that know better.
Yep.
Which tend to be the admins and the security folks.
Or think they know better.
Think they know better.
Or think they know better, yeah. But I mean, generally speaking, again, tying back to our earlier discussion with Dan and Vitsa, we had people on that have 35, 40, 45 years of experience in this industry, and not everybody's going to get that. But think back to what they were saying. From an education perspective, it's important to know how things work. So I would go back to that, knowing how things work, knowing how the systems work, knowing how the frameworks and the building blocks that are so often used with applications these days. I don't know how you get there, but I would think there'd be benefit to teaching people just how, again, I'm using movie analogies. It's the whole Karate Kid thing, the wax on, wax off, paint the fence type of thing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden he's a Kung Fu star, right? Learning how things work and sort of building that making it muscle memory that things are done a certain way. I don't know how else to do it. And how do you jumpstart somebody to give them 30 years of experience in the matter of, even just a 4-year undergraduate degree?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what I was thinking a mentor's role would be. You've got to get somebody to guide them, to get them there. And I agree about the risk that they're the guy that's going to take the shortcut. The security doesn't apply or whatever cliche. Yeah, absolutely. There's the risk.
Yep.
And I also agree with Lee in the mentor, aspect. I mean, if we all think back of who our mentors have been over the years, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that we're thankful for.
Oh yeah.
Especially I think back in my, personally in my career, a lot of people that it's interesting when, we do Business Security Weekly and we talk about effective ways to, for leadership and communications in a security in IT context. Some of those lessons, I'm like, someone told me that when I was still in school, and wow, now I'm really thankful that, they were sharing that advice that we're talking about today on the show as something that, we should do to be more effective leaders and better in our careers. And really a lot of those translate into life in general, right? Like I had people telling me those, some of those lessons.
And mentors, and sometimes mentors come from the most unlikely of places.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I remember to a conversation that I had with Tyler today.
Yeah.
actually, it was a conversation that I had that Tyler was present for, and he texted me later and said, he's like, what the fuck did I just hear? And it was very much that someone that I actually kind of despised, who was not my boss, but he was the boss's boss, and it came to a point where I had to do something, and I think the comment was, don't be so resistant to change. Like, no, we're going to do it this way because this is the way we've always done it, and this works. He said, but there's this other thing that will do it better and faster and more efficient and nicer, and it was, don't be so resistant to change.
Yeah,
and that was the conversation I had today. There's probably a better way that I'm doing this thing that I am doing today, but I want to use it on my Mac.
Yep.
But there's probably a better way, and
Yes.
I know other people know it, and I should.
Who moved my cheese? Who moved my cheese?
Who moved my cheese?
Yep.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of I have that book and I've never read it and I refuse to, but maybe I should.
You should.
It's somewhere right behind me. But I think there's a lot of truth in what we're saying. I stare at this when we're on the air. I went to some conference a while back where they had all the different, ribbons, and I put 34 years in industry, and right above that I put a student because I feel like I'm still learning.
Yes,
absolutely.
Something that I think is a life lesson that I've certainly tried to teach my children, and I think it applies everywhere. And I guess my question is, how do we apply it in the context of what we're talking about? Is I believe that the only way you really learn valuable life lessons is through failure.
Yes.
And figuring shit out and how do you recover? And I'm not sure that that's always allowed to happen in so many environments where, especially as we've been talking about, high pressure, got to get things done, got to get things out there. It's got to work rather than, let's try it and let's see what happens and let's learn from our mistakes. My experience may be different, but I don't see a whole lot of rewards for failure in our industry.
Which is disappointing because I had this exact scenario today, Jeff. I had some code I wanted to contribute to an open source repository. I used it. I had changed something. I had made it better. In my opinion, made it better, and I had no idea how to put that back to GitHub to make it happen. And so I go to my staff, who's GitHub master, Faith, and said, so I need your help. I need to know how to do this. And she says, okay, what's screen share? And we'll do that. I'm like, no. Give me 10 minutes to try to figure it out on my own, and I'll ask you for help if I get stuck. And there was that one point where I got stuck, and I'm like, now what? And it was the last step. And it was, you have to go into the web interface and you have to click this button.
It's always something stupid.
I'm like, but can't you do that from the command line like I did everything else, like you taught me?
Yeah, exactly.
And she says, no, you actually have to go into the web interface and click that button. And then she said, but now here's a great opportunity because you made some spelling mistakes in your comments. I'm going to correct those, and I'm going to show you how I can correct them. It's like
awesome.
Yes, sometimes the student becomes the master, and sometimes the master is the student.
Absolutely,
right?
Always the student, Jeff. I
always
like
the student.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I was, telling our intern, just the other day, that, I've been around Linux and Unix for a long time. I'm like, but every time I do a project or embark on something, I learn something. I'm like, so don't be daunted by you have all this to learn. Like, you're always going to be learning in every single process. That whole thing where we built 3 Linux computers, in the studio this week.
How to change Raspbian to go back to use the old.
Yeah, it grinds my gears that some of the changes that Linux has made, but I had to, learn. And one thing I learned, I'll share with our audience, I had not been keeping up with some of the technologies used in Linux, specifically in the X and Display Manager realm. And have you heard of Wayland? Yeah. So Wayland is like a rewrite of X. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that existed. It's really new. GNOME just fairly recently started including it as the default. And lo and behold, going back to your change story, I was like, all right, I gotta learn new things. X has been a thing for a really long time for me, right? And I'm like, but the benefit was, better performance. And so I'm like, I'm after better performance. I like that. and we used it, and lo and behold, it's been working okay. It seems okay.
Yeah, you did the same to me not that long ago. Apache, and you're like, Nginx. I'm like,
Nginx, dude.
what?
Yes, I know.
Get the fuck out. And I'm like, oh. And then you know what I said? And then you know what I said? F that, github.io.
Yeah. That's also an option as well. Yeah, it's interesting, and you know, when we think about technologies like that, like Apache, like X that have been there forever, we tend to think that no one else can do it better, right?
Yeah.
And because those technologies have been there, but those technologies, since they have been around so long, have their shortcomings.
Yeah, they're encumbered.
We
by
could do
history.
an entire show on X's shortcomings. Let's be honest, right?
Don't get me started.
Apache, as well. Has its issues.
Do you remember having to configure your own display modes with X?
Oh, I was actually just looking at some of that today. It was funny that you say that, Larry, because I was looking at. I'm like, oh, I remember doing this, setting the different display modes and stuff in your xconf. What was it? Xconfig.
x86 conf.
It was one of those old like Etsy X11, one of those config files, and I told the guys just like literally hours before the show, I'm like, I bet you this config file doesn't exist because I'm not running X anymore. I'm running Wayland, and lo and behold, I'm like, nope, that's not going to work. Now we have to pivot, go in a different direction.
To make myself look old, we have this example in the 6617 class where we edit a file in Windows from the command line, and you do copy con.
Ooh.
Oh, and I'm like, every class, I'm like, who remembers doing this in DOS 3.3?
Yeah, to get Doom running.
And I'm like, to edit your autoexec.bat and config.sys.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Because you had to run Doom, and the only way to get Doom to run was to modify those files. Autoexec.bat.
Yep. Who was commenting back? Was that Lee back there, or was that Kevin?
Both probably. All of us remember that. We're all old enough to remember that.
That was me going, oh, wow, I remember that.
CopyCon plenty.
Yep. In the days before edit under DOS 5.
Yep.
The fact that I can still remember that.
I'm
earning the gray in my beard. Whew, man.
Yep.
I think I've already got my gray. I'm gray enough.
Yeah, I've got some gray going on too. I think it's
Yeah.
Now that
you do.
Yep. The Walter mostly white.
Well, I think it's appropriate that I'm teaching a new student now how to use Linux and Unix, and I have the gray.
But you don't have the neck.
Maybe I should the neck beard.
Yeah, I shave under here.
Right.
No neck beard.
Well, now that we've established the fact that we're all now officially old, thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.
Over and out.
Oh, I forgot about that. Sorry.
It's all right. We got that.